Good afternoon on today's Angry Bulletin.
We have ignition and liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket, carrying the proto-flight mission for Amazon's Project Kuiper.
After an interminable wait, ULA managed to get the two prototype Kuiper satellites into orbit with an Atlas V rocket just a few days ago. However, what a lot of people don't know is that Europe is going to be a huge part of deploying the Project Kuiper constellation. Jeff Bezos has contracted 18 Ariane 6 launches to carry a good portion of the Kuiper constellation into low Earth orbit, but what a lot of people don't know is that European taxpayers are going to be paying over €1 billion just to get this constellation in orbit with these Ariane 6 launches. How is that possible? And on the other side of the Atlantic, Sierra Space and Blue Origin appear to have patched up their differences, assuming those differences ever existed in the first place. Both companies have made a statement that they intend to push forward with the Orbital Reef space station. In addition, Sierra Space has made an announcement that they have an upgraded version of the Life module that has more habitable space than Starship. All of this and more coming at you on The Angry Astronaut right now. Good afternoon, and once again, welcome to The Angry Astronaut. So I have a couple of quick announcements to make. First of all, as I've mentioned before, I'm going to be in Ireland on Tuesday for a big fundraiser. I'm going to cover this in greater detail a little bit later on in a subsequent episode, but a very important fundraiser for the benefit of radio communications between planets and also radio astronomy. All of this is being worked on right now just outside the city of Cork, and then on Wednesday will be my first European tour event. And if you'd like to come to that, all of the details are in the description. In addition, I would like to thank Rob Vaughn and Robert Godez, our latest, I think I pronounced that name right, by the way, sorry about that, but the latest Patreon subscribers and supporters of this channel. Really appreciate your help. Once again, working towards trying to get 1% of my subscribers to be Patreon supporters. If this should happen, it will change what I can do on this channel in a huge way, not just in terms of traveling to places to cover various events in person, but also hiring on some staff in order to be able to improve the quality of what I do. So once again, if you'd like to join Patreon for $5 a month or even less than that, well, the details are in the description, and so are the benefits that you get for being a Patreon supporter. Okay, enough of that. Let's get on to the topics at hand. Before we talk about the headline on this particular episode, what was featured most prominently on the thumbnail, we also need to talk about Blue Origin in terms of what's happened with the space station, that is to say, the Orbital Reef space station that supposedly was falling apart. Supposedly the agreement between them and Sierra Space was coming apart at the seams, and really the whole thing essentially had come to an end with Sierra Space being the only company doing any sort of tangible work on the project, which, by the way, Blue Origin received $130 million from NASA, not Sierra Space. Blue Origin got that money, even though Sierra Space seems to be doing most of, not all, of the work. However, that no longer seems to be the case. Recently, both Sierra Space and Blue Origin made a statement indicating, at least on the surface, that they are committed to the success of Orbital Reef. But how did all of this come about? Why did it take so long for these two companies to make a public statement? Now, Sierra Space has been keenly interested in the idea of building a commercial space station since long before the Orbital Reef agreement between them and Blue Origin, and Sierra Space has continued to work extremely hard on this project ever since they secured this all-important contract from NASA. Even though they received none of the money, Blue Origin received all of the investment. Sierra Space raised billions of dollars on their own from private investors to not only complete the Dream Chaser spacecraft, but also to continue work on the Life module, an inflatable space station that has enormous amounts of habitable pressurized space that has the potential to build a bigger space station than the entire ISS in a single launch, and yes, even bigger than the habitable space inside the fairing of Starship. But yet, in spite of all of this promising work, Blue Origin didn't seem to be holding up their end of the bargain. Very little public progress was being made. The Orbital Reef website or their Twitter page was never being updated. Really, it took almost a year before any updates came about the Orbital Reef topic, and then news came from CNBC that the two companies were severing their relationship on the deal. And as you probably recall, I released a pretty angry bulletin about the whole damn thing. However, nearly 2 weeks later, on October 10th, Sierra tweeted the following, quote, "We remain committed to Orbital Reef and to the success of NASA's commercial LEO Destinations Program, or CLD. We look forward to the continued milestone progress on the Orbital Reef program and our next successful testing campaign for soft goods space station technology." And this was apparently done in conjunction with a release from Blue Origin that stated, "We're fully committed to working with NASA to ensure a continued human presence in low Earth orbit. Sierra Space is a big part of this effort and continues to provide deliverables for our NASA CLD Phase 1 contract. We're all in on CLD Phase 2. Interestingly enough, though, Blue Origin still is not mentioning the Orbital Reef name. Of course, I also think that it's a laugh that they're saying that Sierra Space is a big part of this thing, when really Sierra Space are the ones that have a plan to deploy a prototype Life module by 2026, whereas Blue Origin doesn't have any target dates whatsoever at this point. And I reached out to my friends at Sierra Space, asking them why it took 12 days for any information to be released and whether or not there were any discussions that took place between Sierra Space or Blue Origin, or if the whole CNBC story was just some sort of fabrication or exaggeration of some kind. And the answer was they couldn't comment about it at all. I think it's interesting that they didn't deny that there were problems, or that they never said that they've always been 100% committed to this partnership, only that they can't comment. Nevertheless, it does appear that Blue Origin and Sierra Space continue to have this relationship and that Orbital Reef continues to move forward. But in my opinion, that's not what's important here. What's important is what Sierra Space is going to be capable of doing in low Earth orbit once they have operational Life modules, because they're not just satisfied with 300 cubic meters. No, they're taking this to a entirely different level. And once again, I think this indicates why their partnership with Blue Origin is still intact. Let me explain. This is the Life Module 2.0 and 3.0 with 600 cubic meters and 1,440 cubic meters respectively. The Life 2.0 can still be deployed inside a 5-meter fairing, meaning that it can fly on a Vulcan Centaur, and it also includes various types of lighting solutions and micrometeoroid shielding, which apparently is something that needs to be done in order to deploy a space station in the first place. The micrometeoroid impact shielding, by the way, is far superior to a metallic solution because the multi-layered Vectran fabric that these things are made out of is very similar to Kevlar body armor, which, by the way, we use on the ISS to protect against micrometeoroid impacts now. So you're talking about an entire habitable shape that's entirely composed out of very resilient body armor that could stand up to bullets, let alone micrometeoroids. That makes a very big difference as far as the safety of these habitable spaces are concerned. But on top of that, the space of the Life 3.0 is 1,440 cubic meters, substantially larger than the entire fairing of Starship. And there's another detail detail. You may notice that the Life 3.0 can be carried inside a 7-meter fairing, which is the fairing that New Glenn uses, which means that this particular space station module is designed to be carried inside New Glenn, again indicating that the partnership between Sierra Space and Blue Origin, although perhaps a bit battered, seems to still be more or less intact. But regardless of what happens, Sierra Space has a stated objective of putting a prototype life module into orbit by 2026. Exciting stuff coming from this company in the very near future. Okay, let's move on to the topic that everybody wants to hear about. How is it going to cost European taxpayers over €1 billion to put Jeff Bezos' Kuiper constellation into orbit? Well, to be clear, European taxpayers are not going to be paying for Jeff Bezos' constellation to be launched into low Earth orbit, not directly. However, indirectly, they almost certainly will. And the reason for this is subsidies that have gone to Arianespace for a considerable amount of time and are likely to increase in the very near future. In order to remain competitive with companies like SpaceX, Arianespace has required annual subsidies from the European Space Agency in order to stay competitive. According to a recent article on Ars Technica, the financial newspaper La Tribune said that Arianespace are going to be seeking additional subsidies to support the operation of the Ariane 6 rocket in order to make it competitive price-wise with SpaceX launchers. Up to this point, the European Space Agency has been funneling €150 million a year to Arianespace in order to keep the cost down. However, according to the French news report, Ariane Group is now asking for a substantial increase to €350 million a year. This is in spite of the fact that the Ariane 6 is supposed to be a less expensive rocket than the Ariane 5. Consequently, since so many launches have been secured by Jeff Bezos, we're talking 18 launches for the deployment of the Kuiper constellation, well, Ars Technica calculates that approximately €40 million are going to be allocated in terms of subsidies to every Ariane 6 launch. So 40 million times 18 launches means that you're looking at €720 million just for the subsidies alone. But that doesn't include the cost of developing the Ariane 6 in the first place. This has been a very expensive project, a project that once again European taxpayers have largely been paying for. When it comes right down to it, the approximate per launch subsidy for Ariane 6 is €75 million per launch, or €1.35 billion for 18 launches. And believe it or not, the news gets even worse, because according to Andrew Parsonson, who writes the Europe in Space newsletter, well, this really can't be solved at this point. Quote, "There is very little we can do now. I know that. Ariane 6 is a pill that we're just going to have to swallow. We cannot cancel the program, and any new development would take several years to mature. What we can do, however, is make sure Ariane Group is not involved in the future of European launch," unquote. However, I am now about to shock all of you by saying that this may not be the solution. Yes, Arianespace receives entirely too much in the way of subsidies. Yes, Arianespace has been a lazy company resting on their laurels and taking advantage of European taxpayers. However, Arianespace is also trying to do something to make themselves competitive without subsidies, believe it or not. And that's one of the reasons that I've been showing you this informational graphic while I've been giving you all of this bad news, because Arianespace is introducing all kinds of new innovations to the Ariane 6, including reusable Prometheus engines and reusable liquid boosters, something that NASA was working on for a while before they chucked that out the window in favor of the solid rocket boosters that SLS uses. And it's very interesting what they've been up to lately. Not only are they looking to reuse these liquid boosters, these strap-on boosters powered by Prometheus engines and Methalox, but also they intend to reuse the core stage as well. And on top of that, they also want to introduce a kick stage, improving the amount of payload that this rocket may be able to deliver to higher orbits or to interplanetary destinations. And perhaps the most exciting thing that they're introducing in the next decade or so is the SUSI. SUSI stands for Smart Upper Stage for Innovative Exploration, and as you can see, it appears to be kind of a scaled-down Starship. It's designed to carry at least 6 crew members, although given the amount of pressurized space, I think it could probably carry substantially more than that. And it's not only a spacecraft that can go into orbit, it can also land in the same way that Starship does. And this, of course, is a very impressive and exciting development from Arianespace, a substantial and fundamental change in their philosophy. Now, if you're interested in the specifics, well, the SUSI has 40 cubic meters worth of pressurized space, which is more than triple that of the Crew Dragon, so once again, not nearly what Starship is capable of doing, but still pretty impressive for a crewed capsule, or not a capsule actually, a spacecraft, because it doesn't have a disposable trunk the way Crew Dragon does, the way just about any spacecraft has at the moment. Their service module is always expendable. Instead, the SUSI is 100% reusable, just like Starship, and it lands propulsively, also just like Starship. And this isn't just fancy computer graphics either. Arianespace is investing millions and millions of euros in this project. They definitely know that they're behind, and they're trying to make up for lost time. I'm not sure if they can, but at least they're making the attempt. And in addition to that, they're also investing in some small launch providers in Europe in order to provide competition on the small sat market as well. For example, PLD Space in Spain and Orbex in the United Kingdom are receiving funding from Arianespace in order to get their projects moving as well. So Arianespace remains an important part of European launch, although in my opinion, they definitely shouldn't be getting this increase in subsidies, but the subsidies will produce results for Europe in the long run, in my opinion, assuming that Arianespace stays on their current course, and if the subsidies are conditional on them reaching certain milestones when we're talking about reusability. In other words, if you don't have reusable boosters by a certain deadline, you don't get any more compensation. And there's another thing to consider when we're talking about Amazon and Kuiper. Amazon is going to have to pay substantial amounts of money in order to be operable in Europe, and that money is going to be funneled into European companies. For example, Kuiper cannot provide high-speed internet access to anywhere in Europe unless they peer with Europe's internet backbone, which means every European high-speed internet provider, at least the ones who have fiber, are going to receive compensation from Amazon. In addition to that, Amazon is going to have to pay substantial fees to all these different companies and to their various telecommunications departments in order to operate in these various countries. So that's money going into European governments. And finally, in order to be able to provide access at all, Amazon is going to have to co-locate their facilities at various Earth stations around Europe, and they're going to have to pay a pretty penny in order to be able to do that. And I have it on good authority that they've already established their peering relationships and their co-location agreements with a number of Earth stations already, and are paying a substantial amount of money to do that. I've also heard pretty good things about how they do business. So is Arianespace costing the European taxpayer a colossal amount of money in subsidies? Well, yeah, they are. Is that acceptable? No, it absolutely is not, and it's something that needs to stop. And when Arianespace completely embraces reusability and puts this capability into practice, they shouldn't need any more subsidies after that, which means the subsidies, as I said before, need to be conditional. They need to give them this money only if they set verifiable targets for reusability. Only if they achieve these targets or come pretty damn close to achieving them, and only if they implement reusability in all of their operations in the future. However, it does appear that this is what Arianespace is trying to do, and as I said before, they're even providing support to startup launch providers across Europe as well. This is the sort of thing that should be encouraged. This is the sort of thing that should not be shut down completely. But at the same time, this is something that needs to be monitored closely to make sure Arianespace doesn't go back to their old ways. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, please subscribe, and as always, stay angry about space.